My name is Diana Chun, and this is the story of how a stranger's kindness changed everything I thought I knew about my life. After 23 years of marriage, Robert and I divorced. The split was quiet, civilized even, or so I told myself. We divided our belongings, signed the papers, and went our separate ways. He moved across town. I stayed in our old neighborhood, though the house felt too large now, echoing with memories I tried not to hear. I was 47 years old and starting over. The thought terrified me more than I admitted to anyone. But life has a way of moving forward whether you're ready or not. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I landed a position at Henderson and Associates, a small accounting firm downtown. The work was steady, the people were kind, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had a purpose again. My route to the office took me down Maple Street, past the old Presbyterian church and the corner bakery that always smelled of cinnamon and coffee. And that's where I first saw her. She sat on the sidewalk near the bus stop, a withered face partially hidden beneath a grey knit cap that had seen better days. Her clothes were layered against the morning chill, a faded green jacket over what looked like several shirts, worn jeans, and boots held together more by hope than by stitching. But it was her eyes that stopped me. They were clear and bright, watching the world with a quiet dignity that seemed at odds with her circumstances. I don't know what made me stop that first morning. Maybe it was the hollow feeling that had lived in my chest since the divorce. Maybe it was remembering my own grandmother, who used to say that kindness costs nothing but means everything. Or maybe I just needed to feel useful to someone. Anyone. I reached into my purse and pulled out a $5 bill, bending down to place it in the small tin cup beside her. "God bless you," she said softly, her voice like gravel smoothed by water. I smiled and walked on. The next day, I stopped again, and the day after that. It became part of my routine, my small act of rebellion against the emptiness that sometimes threatened to swallow me whole. $5 here, $10 there. Sometimes I'd bring an extra muffin from the bakery or a cup of hot coffee on particularly cold mornings. We didn't talk much at first. I'd smile, she'd nod, and we'd both go about our days. But gradually, like ice melting in spring sunshine, we began to exchange words. Her name was Margaret Flynn, though she told me most people just called her Maggie. She'd been on the streets for 3 years, since her disability checks stopped coming and she lost her apartment. "The system failed me," she said one morning, her breath misting in the cold air. "But I don't let it break me. Not completely. Anyway, I admired her resilience. Even as my heart broke for her circumstances, weeks turned into months. Autumn gave way to winter, and I found myself looking forward to our brief morning encounters. Maggie became more than just a person I helped. She became a reminder that there was still goodness in the world, still connection to be found in unexpected places. Then came that Tuesday in late November. I was running a few minutes late, my mind preoccupied with a difficult client account I'd been working on. I almost walked past Maggie without stopping, but something in her posture caught my attention. She was sitting more upright than usual, her gaze fixed on me with an intensity that made me pause. I bent down to place a $20 bill in her cup. I'd been doing better financially, and it felt good to give a little more. But before I could stand, Maggie's hand shot out and gripped my wrist. Her fingers were surprisingly strong, calloused and rough against my skin. "You've done so much for me," she said, her voice thick with emotion I'd never heard from her before. "Don't go home tonight. Stay at a hotel. Tomorrow, I'll show you something." I stared at her, confused. "Maggie, what are you talking about?" Her eyes, those clear, bright eyes, held mine with an urgency that sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the weather. "Please," she whispered. "Trust me. Don't go home tonight." There was something in her voice, something that bypassed all my rational thoughts and spoke directly to some deeper instinct. Maybe it was the months of connection we built. Maybe it was the absolute certainty in her expression. Or maybe it was just that I'd been sleepwalking through my life for so long that any deviation felt like waking up. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Okay, Maggie." "I won't go home." She released my wrist, her whole body seeming to relax. "The Riverside Inn, 2 blocks east. Tell them Margaret Flynn sent you. They'll give you a room." I was late for work that day, my mind spinning with questions I could answer. What was Maggie talking about? Why shouldn't I go home? And how on earth did a homeless woman have an arrangement with a hotel? Nothing about it made sense. But I'd given her my word that evening. Instead of taking the bus to my neighborhood, I walked east until I found the riverside in a modest but clean establishment I had passed 100 times without really noticing. The desk clerk, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, nodded when I mentioned Maggie's name. Room 237, he said, handing me a key. No charge. Margaret called ahead. I wanted to ask how Maggie had called, where she'd gotten the money for this, what any of it meant. But the words stuck in my throat, and I simply took the key and rode the elevator up to the second floor. The room was small but comfortable, a double bed with a floral comforter, a desk, a small bathroom. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to calm my racing thoughts. Should I call someone? The police? But what would I say? That a homeless woman told me not to go home. So I didn't. Instead, I called Robert. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I hung up without leaving a message. We hadn't spoken in 2 months, and I wasn't even sure why I tried. Habit, maybe, or the ghost of 23 years of marriage still haunting me. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning in the unfamiliar bed, jumping at every sound in the hallway. When dawn finally broke, I was up and dressed before the sun had fully cleared the horizon. I met Maggie at our usual spot at 7:30. She was already there, standing this time rather than sitting, and there was something different about her. She stood straighter, her eyes sharp and alert. Come with me, she said simply. We walked in silence, Maggie leading the way down streets I knew and then some I didn't. After 15 minutes, we turned onto Oakwood Avenue, my street, and my heart began to pound. Maggie, just watch, she said softly. We stopped across the street from my house, partially hidden behind Mrs. Patterson's oak tree. The morning was quiet, the street still mostly asleep. I was about to protest, to demand an explanation, when my front door opened. Robert stepped out. I froze, confusion washing over me. What was Robert doing at my house? He had a key. We'd never gotten around to having the locks changed. He had no reason to be there, especially not at this hour. But then the door opened again, and a woman emerged. She was younger than me, maybe mid-30s, with auburn hair and a figure that spoke of hours at the gym I'd never had time for. She was laughing at something Robert had said, her hand on his arm with an intimacy that made my stomach clench. I watched, frozen, as Robert pulled her close and kissed her. Not a friendly peck, but a deep, passionate kiss of two people who'd done this many times before. My breath caught in my throat. They walked to Robert's car, the silver Audi he'd bought right after our divorce, and drove away. Still laughing, still touching, still completely unaware they'd been observed. I stood there, trembling, as pieces began to fall into place with horrible clarity. Maggie's voice was gentle beside me. I've been watching for 6 weeks, she said. He's been coming to your house every Tuesday and Thursday morning. She spends the night. They leave together around 8. I turned to look at her, tears blurring my vision. How did you? Why? I'm not what you think I am, Maggie said quietly. Or maybe I am, but I'm also more. I used to be a private investigator before. Well, before life happened. Old habits die hard. I watch people. I see things. She paused, her weathered face softening with something like compassion. That first day you gave me money, I noticed your wedding ring was gone, that you still had the 10 line. I recognized grief when I saw it. And I saw him, your ex-husband. I'm guessing watching you from his car one morning. There was something in the way he looked at you that didn't sit right with me. So you followed him. I whispered. I followed him, she confirmed. And I found out he'd been using your house, the home you got in the divorce, as his secret love nest while you were at work. Your neighbors probably assumed you knew. Or they minded their own business. The betrayal hit me in waves. It wasn't just that Robert had moved on. I'd been trying to do the same. It was the violation of it. The house was mine now, my sanctuary, my fresh start. And he'd been using it, defiling it, with another woman, while I'd been struggling to rebuild my life. He'd been playing house with someone else in the space we'd shared for over 2 decades. I wanted to tell you sooner, Maggie said, but I needed to be sure. I needed evidence, and I needed you to see it with your own eyes, because people don't always believe words. I sank down onto the curb, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. Maggie sat beside me, this woman I'd thought I was helping, this woman who'd been protecting me all along. The hotel last night, I said numbly. You didn't want me to come home and interrupt them. Tuesday nights are when they stay longest, Maggie said. I didn't want you to walk in on that. Some images you can't unsee. We sat there together as the streets slowly came to life around us, newspapers being delivered, garage doors opening, dogs being walked, normal life continuing, oblivious to the way my world had just shattered and reformed into something new. What do I do now? I asked, not really expecting an answer. Maggie was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What do you want to do?" What did I want? I wanted to scream. I wanted to rage. I wanted to march into my house and change the locks and maybe throw Robert's things into the yard. But underneath all that anger was something else, a cold, calculating clarity I didn't know I possessed. "I want justice," I said slowly. "I want him to face consequences." Maggie smiled, and for the first time, I saw the sharp intelligence that must have made her an excellent investigator. "Then let me help you, really help you. Because there's more." Over the next hour, sitting in a small diner Maggie apparently frequented, she laid it all out for me. She'd been documenting everything, dates, times, photographs taken from across the street. But more than that, she'd done some digging into Robert's finances. "Your divorce settlement," she said, pulling out a one notebook filled with neat handwriting. "You signed it pretty quickly, didn't you?" I nodded. "Robert's lawyer said it was fair." I was so tired of fighting. I just wanted it to be over. That's what he counted on. Maggie said grimly, "Diana, your ex-husband has been hiding assets." "That accounting firm where you work?" I did some checking. "Henderson and Associates handled Robert's business finances during your marriage. There are accounts he never disclosed, investments he never mentioned. You're entitled to at least another $150,000. Probably more." The number made my head spin. "How did you find all this?" I asked. Maggie tapped her temple. "Like I said, old habits. I still have contacts, people who owe me favors, and I've got nothing but time." She paused. "Plus, you've been keeping me fed and warm for months. I wanted to repay you, but this was about more than repayment." I could see it in her eyes. This was about justice, not just for me, but for Maggie too. This was her reclaiming the skills and purpose she'd lost. This was both of us refusing to be victims. "What do I do?" I asked. "First, you document everything. We go to your house together and set up cameras, small ones he won't notice. We catch him on video violating your space. That's trespassing, breaking and entering, possibly more. Then you take all of this, the financial information, the trespassing evidence, to a lawyer. A good one, not the one you used before." She slid a business card across the table. "My daughter, Patricia Flynn. She's a divorce attorney. One of the best. She doesn't know about my current situation. We're estranged, but she'll help you if you mention my name." I stared at the card, then at Maggie. "Your daughter?" Pain flickered across Maggie's face. "That's a story for another time. But yes, my daughter. Tell her I sent you. Tell her." She swallowed hard. "Tell her I'm proud of what she's become." The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity. I called Patricia Flynn, who agreed to meet with me immediately when I mentioned her mother. The resemblance was striking. Patricia had Maggie's sharp eyes and determined chin, though her face was unlined and her clothes spoke of success and stability. She didn't ask about her mother beyond a brief, "How is she?" I said Maggie was well, which felt like both a lie and a truth. Patricia reviewed everything Maggie had gathered and confirmed what I'd suspected: Robert had committed fraud during our divorce proceedings. With her help, I filed motions to reopen the case. We submitted the trespassing evidence to the police, and we changed the locks on my house, installing security cameras that captured Robert's face when he tried to use his old key 2 days later. The expression of shock and anger on his face when the lock didn't turn was almost worth everything he'd put me through. Almost through it all, I continued my morning routine, stopping to see Maggie, bringing her coffee and food, and now sitting with her to talk, really talk. She told me about her life before her husband lost to cancer, a career that crumbled when grief made her unreliable, the slow slide into poverty and homelessness. She told me about Patricia, about the argument that drove them apart, about pride and stubbornness on both sides that had hardened into years of silence. "I want to reach out," Maggie admitted one cold December morning, "but I don't know how." How do you bridge a gap that wide? I thought about my own life, the marriage that ended, the betrayal I discovered, the new beginning I was building. "One small step at a time," I said. "The same way you cross any distance, one foot in front of the other." The legal proceedings took months to unfold. Robert fought at first, his new girlfriend by his side, claiming the financial records were fabricated, that he'd had permission to use the house. But evidence doesn't lie, and Patricia Flynn was every bit as sharp as her mother. In the end, Robert settled. I received the money I was owed, plus damages for the trespassing. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about what was right, what I deserved. But the real victory came on a Tuesday morning in early spring. I arrived at Maple Street to find Maggie already standing, her few possessions packed in a worn duffel bag, and beside her, tears streaming down her face, was Patricia. They were holding hands. "Diana," Maggie said, her voice breaking with emotion. I told her everything. About the streets, about you, about all of it." Patricia looked at me, her professional composure completely shattered. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for taking care of her, for seeing her when the rest of the world looked away." I felt my own tears starting. She took care of me too. More than she knows. We stood there on that sidewalk, three women who'd found each other in the most unexpected way, who'd saved each other in turn. Patricia took her mother home that day. With professional help, therapy, and the steady support of family, Maggie began to rebuild her life. She got her disability benefits reinstated. She moved into a small apartment Patricia helped her find. She even started consulting on investigation cases again, working from home at her own pace. As for me, I used some of the settlement money to start a small foundation helping homeless individuals who'd fallen through society's cracks, providing the kind of support Maggie had needed, but couldn't access. She helped me run it, of course. Who better to understand what was really needed? And Robert, I heard he and his girlfriend broke up 6 months later. I felt nothing when Patricia told me, not satisfaction, not sympathy, not anything. He'd become irrelevant to my story, because my story wasn't about him anymore. It was about Maggie, about Patricia, about the unexpected kindness of strangers that transforms into something deeper. It was about the hand that reached out to help and the hand that reached back to save. It was about looking at someone on a street corner and seeing not just who they are, but who they might be, who they've always been, underneath circumstances and bad luck and life's cruelties. Sometimes we set out to save someone and end up being saved ourselves. That's not just a lesson. That's grace, and grace, I've learned, is everywhere, even on a cold street corner where a woman in a worn green jacket sits with clear, bright eyes, watching the world go by and waiting for someone to truly see her. We just have to be brave enough to stop, to bend down, to reach out our hand and see whose hand reaches back.